When people see photos of space like these, they think that the telescope that took those photos cost thousands of dollars and looks something like this beast right here. But in reality, all those photos were taken with this little dude. This is the Seestar S30 Pro, and in this video, we're going to dive into what this little guy can really do. And it costs just $599. But first, a huge thanks to ZWO for sending this to me for review. I got this in early January, and along with it came a lot of clouds, a lot of snow. And in the box, we have the telescope OTA, the tracking mount, which works in both alt, as, and equatorial, an uncooled Astrocam, a focuser, a Widefield camera, built-in capture and live stacking software, a dew heater, and yes, these are all built into this little machine. And not seen here are the USB-C cable, a tripod, a solar filter, and a manual. As mentioned earlier, the S30 Pro has an older brother, the S30, and aside from the telescope part being out here, these look exactly the same. They actually weigh the same, and they feel the same, but the S30 Pro has some major upgrades. And in this video, we're going to compare the specs for both of these. And we'll compare some images that I took with both of these at the same night so you can see the quality differences between the two. And then you can decide for yourself whether you want to save a couple $100 and get this for $349 or go for the latest and greatest, the Seestar S30 Pro, spend $600 on this. I've had this for about a year and a half now, and this has been amazing. I have taken this out to well over a dozen outreach events last year, and people's minds are always blown, especially with the live stacking sessions. And I know some people won't see the S30 Pro as an upgrade to the S30, but I'm hoping that I give you enough information in this video for you to decide for yourself, because maybe you won't think that it's still an upgrade by the end of this video, and that's perfectly all right. Let's quickly compare the specs of the S30 Pro versus the S30 and see what the differences and the similarities are. First, these are both 30mm aperture telescopes, but the S30 Pro is 160mm focal length, making it an f5.3 versus the S30's 150mm f5 configuration. That little extra 10mm gives you slightly more zoom, but with the larger sensor, it's kind of like it's not there, but it is. It gives you slightly better pixel scale. And speaking of, these sensors are the IMX585 on the S30 Pro and the IMX662 on the S30. And the IMX585 sensor has become extremely popular over the last 2 years, so it's no wonder they put this into the S30 Pro. The sensor gives you a 2160 by 3840 pixel resolution on the S30 Pro, which is 4K resolution, and the S30 gives you 1080 by 1920, which is just basic HD. The wide-angle camera on the S30 Pro is also 4K at 2160 by 3840 with an IMX586 sensor, and on the S30 is 1920 by 1080. So you'll see the key difference here is that the S30 Pro actually has a wide field sensor that's also in vertical format or in portrait format, whereas on the S30 original, it was in landscape mode. And we don't actually know the exact sensor that's used on the S30, but we do know what it is on the S30 Pro. The field of view on the telescopic mode on the S30 Pro is 4.6 degrees versus 2.46 on the S30, almost twice as big. And the wide field angle gives you a whopping 63 degrees of field of view versus the 23.2 degrees on the S30. The S30 Pro is a quadruplet with one ED glass, and the S30 is a triplet. With a much larger sensor of the IMX585, I think that the Seestar needed to make it a quadruplet in order to give you a flat field. Otherwise, you'd get elongated stars around the edges if you still used a big sensor with a triplet. And a lot of people have actually pointed out that the S30, once you start looking around the edges, the stars do look elongated, and that is probably because of the triplet nature and not the quadruplet nature. So they both have a 6000 milliamp hour battery, and somehow they both still weigh 1.65 kilograms. And of course, the dimensions for both of them are the same at 210 by 140 by 80 millimeters. The S30 Pro has a 128 gig eMMC drive, and the S30 has a 64 gig. The double capacity drive was required because the IMX585 sensor generates much larger file sizes. They both feature Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and USB-C connectivity, but the S30 Pro has NFC or near-field communication as well. They both have the exact same filters, UV IR cut, and the HA03 dual narrowband filters with the exact same bandpass. And they both provide a carrying case, a solar filter, a tripod, a charging cable, and a quick guide. And the S30 Pro currently is $599, and the S30 is $349, although it's still listed as on sale, so it'll probably go up to $400 at some point. Now let's quickly compare the IMX585 sensor to the IMX662 sensor and see what the key differences are. On paper, IMX585 seems to be only slightly better than the IMX662, but in practice, it seems to really be much better than the IMX662. So first, the IMX585 is 11.2 by 6.3 millimeters in size versus the 5.56 by 3.13 millimeters of the 662. It's more than twice the size. You also get a much larger field of view, 4.6 degrees versus 2.46 degrees. The resolution is 8.3 megapixels versus 2.07 megapixels. They're both 12-bit ADC, so you don't get any benefits there. And the full well depth is only about 3,000 electrons difference, so they're pretty close. And the read noise of the IMX585 is listed as 0.7 electrons versus the 0.8 electrons of the IMX662. They both have the same pixel size of 2.9 microns, and they both have the same quantum efficiency of 91% at its maximum. The IMX585 does 46.9 FPS, while the IMX662 does 102.6 FPS. So the IMX662 is used in a lot of planetary cameras for that specific reason. But I'll always maintain that these little smart telescopes are not planetary scopes. But I don't think the Seestar can actually do more than 30 FPS anyway, so. And the bear pattern for both of these are GRBG, although both of them lists online as RGGB. So I think the bear pattern is offset by a line. I think that's how that works, so it becomes GBRG. GRBG. Seestar S30 Pro does have some extra features that the Seestar S30 doesn't, so let's quickly list them. The first is that, as I mentioned before, the Seestar S30 Pro has NFC, which is near field communication, and it's right here. There's a little chip in there where if your phone also has NFC support, near field communication, you can touch it here and it will let you trigger a connection to the Seestar S30 Pro. I'll mention that I said that it'll trigger a connection. It won't actually let you connect to the Seestar and start controlling it with NFC technology. NFC is not strong enough for that. So what will happen is that you touch your phone to this and you'll get a pop-up to change to the Wi-Fi or the Wi-Fi hotspot of the Seestar S30 Pro. Still kind of cool. Seestar is not the first to do this. I had my first experience with NFC with the Dwarf 3, with telescopes, not in NFC in general. So, interesting technology. Just a bonus. Next, the Seestar S30 Pro can do star trails. So they have started using the Widefield camera on the Seestar S30 Pro, and I'm really glad to see it because the S30's Widefield camera was very, very limited. My only complaint about this feature is that at the moment I can't find a way to save the individual frames, so I can't do time lapses of star trails, which is something that I love doing. But I'm sure that's just a firmware/software update that ZOBO can push into the Seestar S30 Pro, and I hope we'll see that at some point. The next extra is Astro time lapses. I think this is listed as Milky Way time lapses as well in some places, and what I found is that it's just a video. It just takes a video and turns it into a long time lapse. Again, you can't access the individual frames. You don't have a lot of controls over it. I'm sure it looks fine from dark areas, but from my laid backyard, it's really boring. And sticking with the wide-angle camera, it also has autofocus on the wide-angle camera, which is really cool. And lastly, it has Milky Way capture. Milky Way, it's not Milky Way season, so I did not get a chance to capture any of the Milky Way, but I'm looking forward to testing this out. Right, taking a look at the Horsehead Nebula taken with the S30 on the left and the S30 Pro on the right, you can clearly see a field of view difference, especially when I zoom out in both of them. Now, if you look at a version where it's edited, here you can clearly see even more of a difference here, like just how much of the nebulosity around the Horsehead Nebula and the Flame Nebula I was able to get. Like all these stars, they just look really, really amazing. And another really good way to look at this is by registering one of those frames. You can overlay it on top of the other, and you can see when I click this, you can see just how much of a difference the field of view makes. And as I said before, the pixel scale for these two are basically similar. So you can crop down if you need to get close to your object in the S30 Pro, the same amount as the S30. Right now, looking at the Orion Nebula, we can see just how much of the field of view is different between the S30 and the S30 Pro. So I'm just gonna minimize that. Let's take a look at some stacked images. And you can see, again, this looks like it's zoomed in a lot more, but again, you can zoom into this one and make it exactly the same scale, and you're going to get exactly the same amount of detail. You're actually going to get a little bit more on the S30 Pro just because of how the pixel scale works there. And again, I process these exactly the same. I process them side by side, but I feel like there's a little bit more color, more or better color around the S30 Pro Orion Nebula. It's probably the sensor just taking the light in a lot better. Again, this was taken from my Bortle 8 backyard. And of course we can do an HDR processing of both of these, and you can see, you know, the trapezium on the inside. We can see more of the nebulosity, more of the structure of the Orion Nebula, and amazingly, they both look really good. I have no complaints about either of these, but I think the color of the S30 Pro looks a little bit better. You can see the trapezium in both of these versions, so it's not like we're missing out on either of these. Now we're going to look at two more images very quickly. We're not going to look at the raw data here, but you can see, again, this is the Rosette Nebula, just how different the field of view looks. I feel like maybe the S30 had a little bit more contrast, but again, this is probably my processing. These were, again, similar processing and similar capture times, but just the extra field of view that we get around Rosette makes it a lot easier to get like all of these regions here, which we couldn't get on this side here. You can zoom in to see the stars. They look very similar pixel scales. All right, the last thing we're going to look at is the Pleiades, the M45. Again, also for my Bortle 8 backyard, this is, I think, this is like 45 minutes. So I was actually impressed that I was able to get any of the nebulosity, but you know, the star colors look great, the nebulosity looks great. Again, we can attribute the saturation to just my processing, but we can see so much more of the nebulosity around here. Comparing some sun images, on the left we have the S30 and on the right we have the S30 Pro, both at 1x zoom, the digital zoom that's available, and we can see the little bit of differences. You can ignore the exposure differences. It's just how it was taken. This is the JPEG straight out of the Seestar. This is to show you that, you know, when you zoom in, you want the exact same details. It's going to be a tiny bit better on the S30 Pro just because of the 10mm longer focal length. If we look at the 2x zoom, it does look like, you know, the S30 gives you more detail because it's zoomed in more. But like I said, pixel scale is the same, so you can zoom in and get similar details with the S30 Pro. To quickly talk about the EQ mode and rejection rate of the S30 Pro. Just like the original S30, it has a 3/8" mounting hole here that you can install on any ball head mount if you have that, or you can use a wedge like this. So this is a Skywatcher wedge that I've had with my AZ GTI with its EQ conversion kit for a long time. It has a plate here with 3/8" holes, or 3/8" mount, and it goes right into the Seestar S30, and it's really easy to set up. Polar aligning and setting up on equatorial mode was super easy, especially with something like this Skywatcher wedge. Having done it on the S30, the learning curve was exactly the same, even easier the second time around. I always recommend doing polar alignment twice to make sure that it's correct, taking this playbook out of Nina's 3-point polar alignment. In EQ mode, I was able to image the Monkey Head Nebula with 60-second exposures with less than 10% rejection, which counts both manual and automatic rejections. And in Alt-Az mode, I couldn't go past the first frame in 60 seconds in either of these telescopes, but both scopes did great at 20 seconds, so I moved on to doing 20-second exposures in Alt-Az, which saves time and space when post-processing. Now to talk about the Widefield camera right up there. This got a major upgrade from the Seestar S30. The S30 had a wide field camera that was super useful when you were trying to find and center the sun and the moon and other objects when you're doing scenery mode, but it couldn't do any kind of astro. But the Seestar S30 Pro, ZW has included a sensor and firmware and hardware and software that can actually do stuff. And one of my favorite modes of astrophotography, one of my favorite types of astrophotography since I got into this hobby, is doing star trails. And I absolutely love that they included this as one of the types of astrophotography you can do with the wide field camera because it looks really cool. And as I mentioned, there's also the Milky Way time-lapse mode, which is a little weird. It's just a video. Maybe it looks really cool in dark skies, but I haven't been able to take it to darker than Bortle 8 at the moment. And of course it has the standard Milky Way mode, and I'm really looking forward to testing that out because I didn't get a chance to do that. And one of the things I really want to try out is the freeze ground mode, where you can take images of the Milky Way galaxy, but it'll freeze the ground for you. We can do that in post-processing using things like Sequitur. I have a video on Sequitur if you want to check that out. So I'm looking forward to trying that out. I hope it'll save the individual frames so that I can process them later myself. With that said, a huge negative of Star Trails mode and even like Astro time lapses is that it doesn't save the individual frames. So if I want to do a quick cool time lapse like this, I can't. And that's especially bad because if a plane or a satellite goes through your frame, that's going to get stacked in and there's no way to remove those. I'm pretty sure I went through all the settings and I couldn't find save every frame, but if I missed it and you spotted it, let me know. In that case, I apologize to ZWO. And if it's not there, I'm sure this can be solved using a firmware update on the telescope itself and a software update onto the app. Now let's talk solar system. We already saw some images of the sun taken through both Seestars, but I want to quickly show you the solar filter that comes with this, and it looks something like this. It's a little bit more of a design change from the Seestar S30, and that's because when you put it on, it actually covers both cameras, including the Widefield camera. And when I saw this, I thought this thing was opaque, that you couldn't see the sun through the Widefield camera and that I wouldn't be able to center the sun, but I was wrong. It's actually not opaque, it's just a solar filter as we normally would expect. And it goes on something like this compared to the Seestar S30s where the Widefield camera is not protected. Long term, the newer version is much better, and this does give you a really cool ringed sun effect. And the sun through both of these look pretty standard, and we already took a look at some of these images. The moon looks pretty similar through both of these, and apologies that these images look a little bit different because they were taken on 2 different nights for various reasons that you don't care about, but the only thing to know is that the only difference you'll see is the size difference, because on the S30 Pro, because of the bigger sensor, the moon will look smaller as we've determined with the sun. But the pixel scale is almost the same, so you can zoom in without losing any detail. Right, now what about planets? I will maintain that these little smart telescopes are not planetary scopes, and I know some people may get upset at me when I say that, but know that if this kind of telescope is all you have, by all means, please use it for planets. At best, on Jupiter, you can kind of see some surface details if your seeing conditions are good and you play with the settings a little bit to try and counteract some of the atmosphere, but overall, like, these are not planetary telescopes, including the S50, although the S50 will get you a little bit closer to the planets. When I reviewed the S50 a couple years ago, I actually ended the video with a long list of wish list items that I wished that ZW would implement with the S50, and to my surprise, they implemented most of them. So let's try again with the S30 Pro and see what happens. First and foremost, I'm going to make this my #1 request because I know it's possible to do, which is to be able to use the wide field camera while you're imaging with the telescopic camera. And I know it's possible because we can use both cameras in scenery mode and in solar system mode. So ZWO, please make this available in DSO mode as well so that we can preview what we're looking at. Bonus request, if we can image with both cameras at the exact same time. I'd also love to see a better folder structure, or at least give us controls over how images should be saved, like we can with Nina. I would also love better multi-telescope support. So right now, if you want to switch from one Seestar to the other, you need to disconnect from one, connect to the other's hotspot or NFC communication, and then you can control that mount. You can also connect to the Seestar network and control your telescope through the internet, but I don't want to do that when I'm at home, and both of my telescopes are in station mode. They have different IP addresses. I want to be able to just switch the IP addresses from the app and control them easily without having to disconnect and reconnect. The next improvement, I already mentioned this, is I would love to see the individual frames save in Star Trails mode, probably in Astro time-lapse as well. I still don't fully understand that, and I'm really hoping that it's saved in Milky Way mode, so I could probably test that, but if it's not there, put it there, but I know it's not there for Star Trails mode. And you don't want to get one-upped by Dwarf Lab, because I heard that Dwarf 3 and Dwarf Mini, they have a Star Trails mode, and they are saving the individual frames. Or my final request, Seestar S70, anyone? Aside from the last one, all of these requests are software and or firmware updates, so they should all be possible to update in the devices that we have on hand now. We shouldn't have to wait for a new one. What about you? What kind of features would you like to see in these little Seestars? Now, I don't know if you want it, but I'll give you my opinion in case it sways your decision in either direction. So first, I think either the S30 or the S30 Pro will be great for anyone looking to get into astrophotography for the first time. Especially if you have kids, because you want something that can set up super quickly. And the Seestar S30 Pro and the S30, you can get started in less than 5 minutes if you're doing it in Alt-Az mode, and about 10 minutes if you're doing it in equatorial mode, which for the attention span of a young person is really great. I think these are also great for seasoned astrophotographers like me who sometimes have like 30 to 40 minutes of clear skies, and I just want to like plop this thing outside for that long, let it image, come back inside without breaking my back. A normal astrophotography rig can take up to an hour to set up depending on what I have to carry, what's being set up, focusing, polar aligning, etc., etc. And this little thing can do all of that within minutes. And I always say that these little telescopes are a great companion rig. So if you have a main rig running, having this run side by side on either the same object or a different object is always really fun. And if you have the Seestar S30 already, is the Seestar S30 Pro worth getting? Personally, I think it's good to just have one of these. The size, the weight, the pixel scale is so similar that you're not going to see that much of a benefit. The only time that I would say move on to the S30 Pro from the S30 is if you're looking for that IMX585 sensor for a wide field imaging session compared to the S30. And to me personally, I think that the sensor change itself is worth the extra $250 for the S30 Pro. So if I had to choose between the S30 and the S30 Pro, I would go for the S30 Pro because of the bigger sensor, and I think it would be a lot more fun in my outreach events when I'm trying to get like large objects like M31. So with that information, if you already have the S30, I would love to hear whether you decide to get the S30 Pro alongside your S30 or to replace your S30. Now if you have the S50, the bigger aperture, the longer focal length, the better pixel scale, is kind of a different ballpark than the S30 Pro. This is smaller. The S50 gets you a little bit closer to stuff in space, but the IMX585 sensor is much better than the one that is in the S50. So, and the sensor itself, I think, is a huge upgrade, but everything else, I wouldn't consider an upward upgrade, maybe a side step upgrade. So, I see the S30 Pro as like a companion rig to the S50, but that's my opinion. And I know there are rumors of the S50 Pro coming out. I have no information on this. I did not talk to ZW about this at all. So if ever, whenever that comes out, the S50 Pro would be an upgrade to the S50. Either way, if you'd like to get any of these scopes and you would like to support me and my channel, consider using the referral links in the description and the pinned comment below to place your order. If you already got the scope or you're planning on getting to the scope, I would love to hear from you. And if you want to stack and process your Seestar images outside of the Seestar itself, if you don't already know about it, I have a couple of scripts in Serial that makes pre-processing and stacking super easy, so check out those scripts when you get a chance. And a huge thanks to all of my supporters on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and YouTube. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to support me and the work I do, consider checking me out on those platforms. Links are in the description and pinned comment below. If you'd like to support me for free, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing the video. And if you order something online, consider using one of my referral links. It helps me out at no cost to you. Enjoy the slideshow of most of the images that I've taken with the S30 Pro, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers, guys.